it was a year later, a full year later, and he called, and my wife answered the phone and said the same thing as, do you know, is he looking? And she goes, he's not, but he could be, right? She said the same thing. She knew. So, so I interviewed, and it was the perfect role. And of course, I made this switch to CUNA Mutual, and I was there for over 25 years,
Yeah.
um, and absolutely love the connection. So that was my kind of jumping in. And just
Okay.
for a point of reference for the listeners, when I joined was basically within 2 weeks of when President Clinton signed HR 1151 into law, right? So the
Wow.
huge Membership Access Act of 1998, that's when I started. And to be honest, Tom, the like after all that, the hoopla and all the buzz and across the industry and the movement, I wondered what have I joined? What have I done?
Like
Because
in
it
a
was
good way
all,
or what? Were you concerned?
I just didn't know. I was like, I've never worked for an organization that has an industry that's so connected with one another that they
Yeah.
celebrate this huge win in, you would think like you had won the Super Bowl, or it was one of those like the national championship or whatever. And but it was the whole country doing it. Right. So I wasn't nervous. I was excited, and it was kind of fun to be swept into that, but I really wasn't sure because at the
Yeah,
time I
no.
didn't know about the advocacy work and all those things. And so I didn't have the
Yes.
perspectives. So it's kind of funny, just like, wow, what have I joined? What have I done? So
I could only imagine, right? I mean, we like to your point, we do all this advocacy work and we have these wins and we celebrate them. But then we also have like the Kool-Aid, right? Like everyone
right,
talks about the credit union Kool-Aid. Well, the Kool-Aid would never have been stronger than at that time, right?
right,
When that bill passed, right?
right.
So yeah, it must have been a wild time. Well, I am really excited to have Gerry Singleton, President and CEO of Montana's Credit Unions, joining the Credit Union Nation podcast. Thank you very much, Gerry. Appreciate it.
Absolutely. Thanks, Tom. Thanks for inviting me. I'm excited for our conversation.
Yes, yes, me too. And, our conversation has already been ongoing. As soon as Gerry jumped on, we were already talking about, everything that we're passionate about, everything Gerry is passionate about.
Mhm.
And we were talking about the ways that the Montana's credit unions are supporting credit unions across the state of Montana. And, something that you all should know as listeners and viewers of this podcast is Gerry at his core is a facilitator. I don't know if I'm speaking out of term, but maybe you would say that's the thing that you are best at or that you love most as far as sort of the professional work that you do. And I'll tell you how, my exposure to Gerry's facilitation in a second here. But now, as the president and CEO of Montana's credit unions, you sort of have this new leadership role, and it's not super new. You've been in the role for a couple of years now.
Mhm.
But it's a leadership role. But I can tell based on some of the things that you're doing that you're bringing sort of a facilitator's mindset to how you lead that organization. Do you think that's fair that you're sort of making this leadership role your own through like what you're best at? Is that kind of a fair question?
I think it's a great question, Tom, and I think it's absolutely true.
Mhm.
I would add facilitator, and I would also add connector to that as well. That's one of the things that I enjoy probably more than most anything else is connecting. And you've been in national roles, I've been in national roles, and so we know people, right? We know a lot of people who are amazing at what they do, and they're experts in their fields and things like that. And so to me, there's nothing better than when somebody reaches out with a request or a need or a challenge or even an opportunity to be able to connect in that same way.
Yeah.
And that connection, sometimes it's just one to one, sometimes it's many to many. And so that's where the facilitation also comes in
Mhm.
to see the group process, right? If you think of training and facilitation, training is about the content, facilitation is about the people, right?
Right.
And so in my role as the leader here, I see that connection happening too. It's about the people, and the more we can connect people, facilitate right opportunities and challenges and things like that, I think that's a great thing.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. Yeah, well, before we did the introduction, we were talking a little bit about some of the, I would say, innovative things that Montana's credit unions is doing now to be relevant to its credit unions, to its members, and to connect credit unions together, and to just be a resource for credit unions in the state. And we'll, we have some of that on tape already, and we'll definitely use that. But I just want to make sure that we really highlight it because, when I was working for the National Association, one of sort of the underlying themes for the industry and for the movement was league relevancy,
Mhm.
and consolidation at the league level, similar to how we're seeing consolidation at the credit union level. And I think that you're doing something, and the league is doing something really innovative as far as relevancy and sort of security as an organization. So can you talk a little bit about some of those innovative things that Montana's credit unions is doing to be relevant and innovative?
Sure. No, absolutely. And
Mhm.
if you can hear my dog in the background, somebody's at the door. I can hear the dog barking. So hopefully it's not
Okay, yeah,
too.
sounds good. My kids will probably jump in here at some point.
Yeah.
Yeah.
uh, so a couple of things that I would highlight, Tom, to your question on innovation, which ties to relevance, right? As trade associations were, and as credit unions, our whole industry, I think we're in this race to relevance, this road to relevance to make sure we're relevant, not only today, but well into the future. It's like you go backwards to go forwards. You look at the past and why were we founded? Why were we formed? What were we trying to solve for? What unique challenges? And it goes back to people, right? And people's unique challenges. And credit unions today are doing many of the exact same things. They're doing it different ways, of course, but doing it, solving many of the same challenges that people had 100 years ago, right?
Mhm.
And so I think that's great. So two things that I would highlight, Tom, that the league is doing here in Montana, specifically. One is leveraging our superpowers, and I think that's what we all have to do is find out what we're really good at. You mentioned earlier for me when I joined, I bring facilitation in, right? And connection. And so that's you'll see my leadership style kind of leans in that direction, intentionally so, because that's a strength. And so I think we play to our strengths. The league is known for one of the things we're really, really good at is our education and events. Among many things, we've got a lot of solid things around compliance, risk management, around our advocacy, around our partnerships, and collaboration. So we've got a lot of strengths. One of the things we found uniquely so was our education and events and our programming. And so we actually work with several other leagues, as well as other associations, both in Montana and outside of Montana, including national associations. And then we
Yeah.
also work within the cooperative movement with our education and events. So
Mm.
that's a way I think you find something you're good at, and if it's something you can scale and repeat and continue to bring value beyond your core, that's a way to do it, right? Not only does it increase our impact and influence, which is what we're about, right? Our connection across the industry and across the world, association world, it also brings in revenue, right? And that's an important part of we want to make sure we're able to be here well into the future. So that's a big part of the business model. The
Yeah.
other one is our league has said, like many other leagues, we want to remain an independent trade association to support the unique needs of Montana's credit unions. And as I was interviewing for the role over 2 years ago now, I said I 100% agree and support that. And the answer is collaboration, right? The answer is not isolation. The answer is collaboration. And so
Right.
the second thing I would share, Tom, in addition to kind of exporting our education and events expertise, the second thing is we formed a partnership, a collaboration with the Minnesota and Wisconsin leagues,
Mm.
and called the Tri-State Collaborative. So it's a formal LLC. The three leagues have come together to really look at ways we can continue to be relevant to our credit unions across the three states,
Mhm.
as well as be more efficient in what we do. So it's kind of one of those, let's bring scale, let's also bring efficiency. And those two things added together is a great way to bring value. And bringing value is really important.
Yeah, 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 I totally agree. I was actually the beneficiary of some of the Montanan expertise around education
Mm.
a couple of years ago. So one of the first small credit union conferences that we did at CUNA was in Utah, and we partnered with a number of leagues, one of which was Montana and and the Dakotas. And through that, we met Rennell, and Rennell
Mm.
basically like kept us, afloat.
Right.
Especially me personally, who like doesn't have like an event planning background.
Sure.
She like kept us straight and knew exactly, what we needed, how to run a professional and organized event. And it was really
Mhm.
wonderful to see that firsthand. And so you definitely have a great a great resource there in
Mhm.
Rennell, and I
Yep.
know she loves it, and she's a credit union family. I think her husband is on the board of a small credit
Yep. He's
union.
the chair of the
Yeah.
board of a smaller credit union here in Montana. So that's, yep, really cool.
Yes. Yeah. So great
Yep.
to have sort of the expertise and the credit union background. Okay, and I know another way that you're collaborating with not just credit unions in the state, but with other organizations in the state is with other co-ops in Montana. I know there's a huge cooperative culture in the state. So can you talk about how the league is cooperating with some of those groups?
Sure. Yeah. One of the things that's really interesting here is, co-ops. Co-ops are all over the country. There's lots and lots of co-ops doing different things. And when I went through the credit union development educator program in 2007, that's
Mhm.
where I first learned more about co-ops broadly and how credit unions are part of co-ops. When
Mhm.
I joined Montana's credit unions a couple years ago, I one of the first meetings I had was with the Montana Council or Montana Center of Development, uh, MCDC. I'm saying it wrong. The MCDC, which is the Montana Cooperative Development Council. So anyway, so uh, that organization works with all co-ops, all sectors in Montana. So it includes the electric co-ops, ag co-ops, broadband and telecom co-ops, worker-owned co-ops, food co-ops, like all the co-ops, including credit unions. And one of the things we started doing is every quarter we would meet with the leaders of each of the trade associations for those different sectors. And we would meet to share ideas, to share strategy and what we're doing. And where it led was within our legislative session, it led to advocacy conversations. And so what we ended up doing was we created this roadshow of the leaders of the different trade associations attending one another's meetings and talking about where the intersection is on advocacy issues, sure, on collaboration opportunities, on how we're supporting our local communities across the state. And
Mhm.
so that has been really exciting to have that networking. We did a mutual hike the hill at our state capitol for the first time, where we had members across the sectors were participating in our hike the hill and a legislative luncheon that we did. So
Wow.
things like that are really, really powerful and cool. And then this year we launched the Co-op Academy. So it was a 3-day program, an immersion program for people in co-ops across the state to learn more about the cooperative business model,
Mhm.
about the other sectors, how financials work, for example, how the cooperative principles show up. And then at the end, we gave each of the groups a case study, and it was a live case study, a real challenge in a real community in Montana.
Mhm.
And what we said is, how can co-ops collaboratively solve this challenge in that community? And it was
Sure.
really cool in a 3-day window, right? And it's not even full 3 days; it's partial days. How collaborative the groups came up with some pretty innovative and cool solutions to solve real challenges that Montanans are facing in our communities across the state. So that was very cool, and it was a cross-sector collaboration to build the curriculum. We worked with a local college
Mhm.
as well, so we had faculty from the university that were part of our steering committee. We had representatives from credit unions from all the different sectors, and it was cool to see it come together and then to deliver it. And in there, we had representatives from all of the sectors in Montana who were attendees, participants in the program.
Okay.
We also had two organizations that were looking to find ways to support co-ops. And then we had 3 people come who are looking at starting a co-op, who didn't have a lot of awareness on co-ops, and they had an idea and they're trying to figure out if co-ops could solve for that idea that they had. And it was
Yeah.
really cool to see that collaboration. And that's unique as I've talked to my peers and others around the country. It doesn't this cross collaboration in this way and then ultimately lead to additional education and collaboration. It's pretty unique in Montana, which is a really cool thing.
Yeah. Yeah, it's interesting, this connection to co-ops. That's actually how I got started at CUNA and how I got
Okay.
involved in credit unions to begin with, because I was working for a newspaper out in California. I just shared this story with David Murphy on his podcast, See You at the
Okay.
Top. So if you haven't heard that, go
Sure.
listen to the full Tom Saycash How I Got into Credit Union story. But like the long and short of it is that in my old job working for newspapers, I became sort of friendly with all the city council members in the city of Davis, California,
Okay.
which is a huge co-op town. They've got the Davis Food Co-op. It's a very agricultural area, so there's a lot of, farm co-ops. and it's a big sort of co-op culture. And when my wife and I made the decision to move back to the Midwest, this guy named Lucas Ferrix, I think he was just a regular city council member. He wasn't the mayor at the time, since became mayor. Gosh, it's been 10 years, more than that,
Mhm.
15 years. He's like, you gotta, if you're moving back to Madison, there's a great organization there called Credit Union National Association.
Mm.
It's the National Trade Association for Credit Unions. I know members of the board, et cetera, et cetera. And that's how I found out about the organization and how I, first got into credit unions. Um, and so there's definitely like a huge link for co-ops. I mean, credit unions, as we know, are co-ops. But I want to challenge you and just get your opinion, I guess, is do credit unions lean into that co-op label enough? As a board member for a credit union here in Madison, I've kind of shared with our marketer that we should lean into that because I think people who have this affinity for co-ops, maybe that might resonate with them. There are
Mhm.
credit unions who I've spoken to who sort of lean into the co-op sort of label and in hopes that other people in the community who love co-ops will also see, oh, this is a co-op financial institution. What a great thing to be a part of. So curious to know if you've seen that, if other credit unions have leaned into that. Does it happen more in Montana maybe than in other places? Like how much should the industry be leaning into the co-op label or the cooperative label?
Sure. I will say we always can and should do more to lean into it.
Hmm.
And we have to lean into it in ways that resonate with the average consumer, the average, I'll keep it to Montana, the average Montanan in such a
Hmm.
way that they understand what it means and the value and the power of it. So I would say always there's more to do. And I would say many of our credit unions embrace it, either wholeheartedly or embrace aspects of it, specifically and uniquely based on their field of membership or their community needs. So I would say I've seen it alive and well in Montana, I guess is probably the short answer.
Hmm.
The longer answer, what I'm hearing from many of our CEOs is as they're bringing in new folks, especially in the front line,
Hmm.
they don't fully understand the power of what they've joined and what does that mean? What does that look like?
Sure.
And so one of the things we're exploring is how do we as a trade association, how do we help to support that? And so, we have our philosophy training that we just revamped that's launching here really soon. That's
Hmm.
a way to do it. We've attended their staff meetings or even led their all staff days and with a hyper focus on the cooperative side of things.
Yeah.
And some of what they're looking for, Tom, are just the quick hits. Like one of our credit unions said, we meet every Wednesday morning right before we open for half an hour just to regroup. Here we go. That's a window of time.
Hmm.
How do we weave in a 5 minute or a 7 minute snippet on a cooperative value, a cooperative principle, just so the whole staff can ground on that piece? And
Yeah.
so those are ideas I think we're still exploring is how do you do the quick hits,
Yeah.
right? And the member moments or the cooperative principle moments or something that's quick hit that a CEO who wears all the hats, does all the things, can
Hmm.
easily pick up and either show or hit play or lead a small conversation without having to prepare and create and do those things. And so anyway, there's something there. So I'll
Yeah.
put it out to our listeners as well. If you have ideas or you have best practices or things, we're wide open here. We do some of that, and it would be nice to have this. What if you had a year long's worth of right ready to go plug and play 5 minute quick hit moments that
Mm.
are focused on the cooperative values and principles that credits could do. So
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, that's just sort of like the beautiful thing of working in this industry is that there are so many opportunities to just like celebrate that you belong to something really special, right?
mhm, right.
Whether it's the model or, the ways in which credit unions leverage that model, like,
Mhm,
for community good. Like I was always, I always just felt like we needed to do more to share the stories of what credit unions are doing.
mhm,
But I think the cooperative thing is interesting because I don't see a lot of credit unions using that label, right? Like I don't see like I see
right.
a lot of big credit unions advertising and sort of promoting themselves in the Madison market, and we're getting new
Right.
ones. Seems like every couple of months here,
Right. Wow. Yeah.
because Madison is growing, right? I mean, it's a
Sure.
great community to
Hmm.
have a foothold in for sure. So
Sure.
I understand it,
Hmm.
but I don't see anyone saying, I'm such and such credit union, a cooperative financial institution, right? Like I
Right.
don't see Navy doing that
Right.
really
Yeah.
either. And I'm just curious why, because I do think that there are, quite a few people who that resonates with. And it is such a superior business model, right?
Hmm.
So like,
Okay.
let's promote the fact that,
Sure.
that we are these great cooperative
Hmm.
organizations. I think that's a really great thing. Um, I wanted to I wanted to ask you a little bit about your personal story, of how you got into credit unions and kind of talk a little bit about your journey to where you are today. I shared a little bit about how I got into credit unions, but can you talk a little bit about where you started, how you got into credit unions and like when did you fall in love with the industry?
Hmm. Sure thing. There, I'm going to say there are little moments, little tiny moments, winks, if you will, throughout my life, probably that led me to the larger moment. So I'll kind of start with the larger moment.
Hmm.
Um, so my family and I had moved to Georgia, so we lived in Yellowstone National Park. So my wife
Hmm.
and I met in college working in Yellowstone, and we were members of the Yellowstone Federal Credit Union.
Yes, I was going to mention
Unfortunately,
it if you didn't. Yeah, we've talked
yep,
about this credit
yeah,
union in the
so we were
past.
members of the Yellowstone Federal Credit Union. How cool is that? And it's
Yeah.
right there at the headquarters of Yellowstone in Mammoth Hot Springs. Really cool. Unfortunately, they've merged into other credit unions as so many of our credit unions have done over the years. And
Mhm.
so it no longer exists. However, we moved from Yellowstone to Georgia. And my background, as you mentioned earlier, is training and development, and facilitation and those things. And I've done that for a really, really long time. And so I was the training manager for an organization in Georgia that had a credit union. And
Mhm.
so I would invite the credit union manager in to lead home buying and car buying seminars and do things for our employees broadly. And then for new employee orientation, we would always focus on the credit union. We would auto enroll them into direct deposits and have them join the credit union, all those things. So we did a lot of collaboration. So as the training manager for my organization, I partnered closely with the credit union. Well, the credit
Sure.
union wanted to send a couple of staff to a train the trainer program that the Georgia League was offering. And since that was my background, the credit manager said, I'll pay for you to go to evaluate it and see if it's any good before I send other people. I would love to have you go.
Hmm.
So I went. So it was the Georgia League. So my very first entree into credit unions was kind of at the league level. So it's really interesting
No kidding.
nearly
Okay.
30
Yeah.
years later to circle back and actually work at a league, right? So that's
Yeah.
pretty cool to see
Yeah.
that full circle. So during that time, I connected with one of the other participants who was one of the sales managers for CUNA Mutual Group. Now it's True Stage, but for CUNA Mutual, he and I just hit it off, became fast friends.
Hmm.
And he's like, "Hey, are you looking for a job? It would be fun. It'd be fun. I think you'd be a great fit at CUNA Mutual." And so I said, I'm not, but I could be. I tell people never turn down an opportunity to have a conversation around a new career opportunity, or if nothing else, it gives you practice, right, for interviewing and connecting with people in different ways and articulating your message and all those things. So
Yeah.
I actually interviewed for a role and it wasn't the right fit, right? And I knew it, the person knew it. However, the manager said,
Do you
we're
remember
working,
what the role was? Do you remember the
yeah.
original role? Yeah.
Oh, the role was a lending specialist role. And
Really?
I have no background in lending, nothing, but they did a lot of training, right? Lending specialists, at least back in, they did a lot of training at credit unions.
Yeah.
And so the person was thinking you might be a good fit as a training person. However,
Hmm.
it just didn't, it wasn't the right opportunity.
Yeah. Yeah.
The manager though said, we're working on this other thing I think you'd be perfect for. I'll just save your resume. And if something happens, with the role, if the role gets approved, then I'll let you know. It was a full year later, and he called, and my wife answered the phone and said the same thing. Do you know, is he looking? And she goes, he's not, but he could be, right? She said the same thing. She knew. so so I interviewed, and it was the perfect role. And of course, I made this switch to CUNA Mutual, and I was there for over 25 years,
Yeah.
um, and absolutely love the connection. So that was my kind of jumping in. And just
Okay.
for a point of reference for the listeners, when I joined was basically within 2 weeks of when President Clinton signed HR 1151 into law, right? So the
Wow.
huge Membership Access Act of 1998, that's when I started. And to be honest, Tom, the like after all that, the hoopla and all the buzz and across the industry and the movement, I
Mhm.
wondered what have I joined? What have I done?
Like
Because
in
it
a
was
good way,
all
or what? Were you concerned?
I just didn't know. I was like, I've never worked for an organization that has an industry that's so connected with one another that they
Yeah.
celebrate this huge win in, you would think like you had won the Super Bowl or it was one of those like the national championship or whatever. And but it was the whole country doing it, right? So I wasn't nervous. I was excited and it was kind of fun to be swept into that, but I really wasn't sure because at the
Yeah,
time I
no.
didn't know about the advocacy work and all those things. And so I didn't have the
Yes.
perspectives. So it's kind of funny, just like, wow, what have I joined? What have I done? So
I could only imagine, right? I mean, we like to your point, we do all this advocacy work and we have these wins and we celebrate them. But then we also have like the Kool-Aid, right? Like everyone talks
right,
about the credit union Kool-Aid. Well, the Kool-Aid would never have been stronger than at that time, right?
right,
When that bill passed, right?
right.
So yeah, it must have been a wild time. And then like a really big inflection point for the industry because that opened up access to membership for credit unions. And so there must have been we'd have to get Mike Shank on the phone here.
Sure. Yeah.
And like, was there just massive growth for the industry after that? Was that just like a huge launching pad?
Right. Good question. I don't know. Right. You think it obviously, I know a lot of credit unions started moving to community charters,
Right.
looking at ways to expand their field of membership, to
Hmm.
offer new products and services. Right. So it was,
Yeah.
I would say it
Well,
was maybe, if nothing else, it was a golden age of innovation and
sure.
creativity and
Mm.
solving unique member challenges, right? And community challenges.
Hmm. Yeah,
So anyway, so
totally.
that was my entry in, and like I said, it was 25 years, just over 25 years that I was there, and loved every minute. The impact, the role that now True Stage, the role that True Stage plays in the movement is profound, right? And in my role there, I worked with all the trade associations, all the leagues, all the right, the alphabet soup of associations that serve our amazing movement. That was
Hmm.
my role. And so we talked earlier about facilitation and connection, like I was living my best life, right? In a really
Yeah.
cool way. And then to have this opportunity to move into the league role, which was one of the key partners that I worked with for many, many, many years, to
Right.
see it on the other side has been so powerful to go deep with our credit unions, to go deep with our board, deep with our employees. And you're like you're doing the work, you're seeing the impact right away firsthand. And there's nothing better
Yeah.
than that.
Yeah. Oh, that's awesome. That's really awesome. Well, throughout your time at CUNA Mutual, now, now True Stage, I think you did a great job, maintaining your sort of involvement in facilitation and training, right? Like even though that probably wasn't, especially towards the end of your time at CUNA Mutual,
Mhm.
it probably wasn't like a key part of your role, I guess. But you had your hands in a lot of other things that allowed you to sort of like continue doing that work. One of which was DE, of course, and that's where you and I first met almost
Sure.
10 years ago, eight
Yeah.
years ago.
Wow.
And because you were one of the facilitators, along with Lois Kitsch, of
Mhm.
our class, November 2017, which was the best class ever. And like, it's so funny to hear other people say best class ever, just like
Right.
knowing how wrong they are.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, what's up with that?
But so first I remember walking with you. I think we had gone to Starbucks like one morning before the program started that day, and you and I were walking back, and like I turned to you after this is probably like 5 or 6 days in, and I'm like, I just want you to know that like you are so good at facilitation. You're probably better at this than anything that I'll ever be at like in my entire life. Like you have like an absolute gift in that work, and it's still true to this day because I've seen you in action, on many occasions at this point. But it really is like a pleasure if you ever have the opportunity to use Gerry for training, and I know that you still offer, some programs, I think.
Mhm.
Like take advantage. It will change your life, and it will make you a better person, better professional. So I sincerely mean that, Gerry.
Yeah.
You're one of a kind and amazing at what you do from that standpoint.
Well, thank you, Tom.
But can
Thanks
you
for that.
talk?
Okay.
Yeah,
Mhm.
sorry. You can say whatever.
No, no, I was just saying thanks for that. Thanks for the kind words. What I love about facilitation is it, like I said earlier, it's about the people. And to expand on that just for just a real quick second is it puts, as you can tell, I'm an extrovert and I love to talk, right?
Mm-hmm.
Facilitation puts that on to the participants, right? And so self-discovery is such a huge part of learning and growth and development. And so when you can see a group move from point A to point B or point A to point Z, right? And you know you play a small role in that journey of self-discovery, that's way better than anything, any words of wisdom I personally could ever impart, right? And so to see that piece, that to me is the beauty of facilitation.
Yeah, yeah. Yeah, well, I mean, I feel like one of the things that I've done, professionally is go through your experiential training and facilitation program, and I've taken so many things from that I'm now applying to strategic planning that I do with credit unions and boards, and it's just massively beneficial, and it goes back to kind of what we were talking about at the very beginning about that reflection time,
Mhm.
like there are definitely times to share wisdom and to share your knowledge, but then there's just as importantly a lot of time to share or to give space to think and reflect,
Mhm.
and it's just as important as the knowledge gathering, right? um, but can you talk a little bit about just your experience with DE and like what that program has meant to you? I know you just facilitated for the first time in a few years, so I'd love to hear how that went. But like more broadly, like what the DE program has meant to you, and
Mhm.
some of your highlights, maybe.
Sure. Well, without sounding trite at all, I've heard many people say this, and I say it, with genuineness in my heart, is DE changed my life,
Mm,
right? And you'll hear many people who've gone through DE say that, right? And that's true. So for me, I went through in 2007. What was significant about that was my boss, my leader at CUNA Mutual at the time, was scheduled to attend and he was going. He was signed up and he was going and he was very excited to go. And then he realized I need to pay it forward. I need to, I would rather the next generation come along and go through it. He was within 2 to 4 years of retirement. And so he actually gave his spot to me, right? How cool is that? I mean, to me,
yeah,
that if nothing else symbolizes what DE is all about, that act alone to me is what it's about. And
yeah,
so that was powerful. So I was able to go because he gave me his spot to go. And as you guys know, it's a treasured spot, right? There's a wait list. It's one of those like you're getting concert tickets and you have everybody on the phone ready to hit go right away.
right.
It's
Yeah, I mean, if there are 60,000 people, 100,000 people who work in the credit union movement, 170, 160, 170 can go through the program a year,
right,
right? Like
right,
that is an exclusive
yes,
opportunity without a
right.
doubt. Yeah. Yeah.
Yep, absolutely. And so for those who have gone through it, you know that this it's a week-long immersion into all things credit union, the heart and philosophy and soul of credit unions, right? And so you go deep and it's very raw in a lot of ways, it's very real in a lot of ways.
Mm,
And you're with a group of other credit union people from all over the world, and you form these bonds that are lifelong bonds. You have a mentor who is really your guide throughout the week.
mm,
You have table mates, classmates, participants, the whole class plus your own table group, and you get to be really, really close. And I still am in. That was 2007, so that's been a minute, right, since I went through. I'm
mhm,
still in contact with many of my direct teammates. My mentor is one of my best friends, right, and continues to be have a huge influence on the credit union movement. Won the Herb Wagner Award recently, right? And so anyway, very life changing in so many ways. And then a couple years later, I went through an international program in the Caribbean DE program called Carib
mm.
DE. And what
Sure.
I
Yeah.
and that was so powerful too to see it in a whole different light, to see credit unions in the Caribbean, so in an international context, and yet credit unions are credit unions the world over, right? They're formed for the same reasons, they have the same passions, they execute maybe slightly differently based on cultural context. However, it's really cool to see, and so that opened my eyes to the world of credit unions, literally the world of credit unions, and there, what the impact that it had on me personally, Tom, was I had gone to the Caribbean with my son on a mission trip actually, and we were working in orphanages and youth prisons.
Mm,
And one of the things we saw there was kids who are in orphanages, when they age out, they oftentimes, and it's true in the US too, by the way. I'm very passionate about this. So it's true in the US, but in the Caribbean in particular, we saw this huge need when kids age out of the orphanage or foster care, we might say here, they were not equipped. They didn't have the skills and tools on how to survive in the world. And so
mm,
what we saw was when we worked with an orphanage, then we went to a youth prison, and many of the kids in the youth prison were former orphans who didn't know how to survive. And so DE, one of the powers of DE is you leave with a project, right? Something you're going to do in the world to make a difference. It might be really tiny, it might be huge, whatever it is, it's going to make a difference no matter what. That's really
yeah,
cool.
yeah,
So my project was to partner credit unions in the Caribbean, local credit unions, with orphanages to teach financial education. Let's at least help equip them when they leave with
mhm,
how to deal with money, how to get a job, how to do those things. And so that was my project, is to help with a financial reality fair, and then
mhm,
also then to bring in local organizations in the Caribbean with credit unions, and then to help educate orphans in particular, also others, but really orphans in particular to do that. So you leave with a project, right? So that's my
sure.
that's my main point.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Um,
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. I mean, I do think that that's such an important part of the whole experience. I mean, you do go through all these really trying experiences, for us, and I know the program has changed over the past couple of years. But some of the things that we went through, including secret shopping at like a payday lender, and
sure.
we went to a pawn shop.
Mhm.
And like here we are, we're a bunch of sort of outside observers walking into this pawn shop, and we walk in the door and there's a line of people, and those people aren't there playing a game or playing secret shopper. They're there, for unfortunate reasons, more
Sure.
than likely, right? And so it just really opens up your eyes, not only to what credit unions can do, and the capacity that credit unions can the capacity that credit unions have to make an impact, but also just what challenges are out there, right?
Mhm.
Like what people are facing on a daily basis.
Right.
And how lucky are we that we get to work in an industry and for institutions that have the resources and the tools that can sort of chip away at some of those challenges, right?
Sure.
And so it really is transformational without a
Mhm.
doubt. I mean, like
Mhm.
I was all in on credit unions before then, I think, before I went through DE in 2017. And it actually only took a couple of minutes, like we were
Mhm.
talking about, like those
Sure.
little bite-sized learning opportunities that credit unions
Yeah.
put their staff through. When I
Mhm.
started at CUNA, like they give you, a bunch of modules to learn about the industry and the history of the
Mhm.
company and all that stuff. And I
Sure.
remember watching the one on the history of credit unions and like the description of the model and all that stuff. And I was like I get to work for the good guys. Like this
Right.
is amazing,
It's awesome.
So I was bought in then, but DE definitely drives it home, right?
Mhm.
And it really does change your life and change your worldview. And so also huge recommendation for anyone who hasn't had the opportunity for they themselves to go through the program, or if you're in a position where you can send a staff person
Mhm.
to it because you want them to be bought into the industry forever, do
Sure.
it. Yeah, it's
Right.
one of the best investments that you can make without a doubt.
Yeah.
And so you facilitated recently. How did that
Right.
go? Like, what was the
Yes.
experience?
So it's interesting for those of you who've gone through the DE program, we all had our own experience, right? And the experience is hours and hours alone. And we went through it at a point in time, and it was the best class ever, right?
Like?
Of
Mhm.
course.
Yeah.
And so I had facilitated and mentored in the United States and in Africa many times, right? So facilitated multiple times and had not in a few years. And so I was invited to facilitate again just in June, just recently.
Hmm.
And I wondered, there were a lot of changes, right? The program has evolved. I'll use evolution and maybe revolution in some ways. So it's evolved in some pretty significant ways. And so there's always that question of, is the experience going to be the same? Am I going to have that, or not me, but are the new folks coming in, the new DEs, are they going to have that same kind of
Right.
secret sauce moment, this magical space of credit union heart, right? With this connection of people from all over the world. Is it still going to be the same? You always wonder. is going to be the same because my experience was so profound and had a huge impact on me personally and
Mhm.
professionally. Is it's still going to, with all these changes, still going to have that same piece?
Mhm.
And I
Yeah.
will unequivocally 100% say absolutely yes, right?
Yes. Awesome.
Which was awesome to see the almost 60 participants, right? To see the light bulbs go off, to see those connections, to see the relationships built, to see the hard work, right? And I won't give away tons of it, but it's a work, right? There's a lot of work, and you put a lot
Oh yeah.
into it
Yeah.
as participants into DE, and you leave tired, right? You leave worn out, and to me, that's a measure of success in some ways. And the reason I know, Tom, that it's still this magical experience for people is in the program, of course, to see the light bulbs, see the connections, to hear the conversations from folks, absolutely there. And since then, in fact, just last night, I got a message from one of the participants in there talking about how she was applying these things in her credit union, in her
Mm.
community, and it was life changing. New partnerships are being formed between credit unions and local organizations, which is
Mm.
a big piece of it.
Yeah.
Some people are taking back, right, teaching more about the cooperative principles in their credit unions. Some of the output, some of the work of the groups, right, is it was really good stuff that these could be programs, these could be new programs being launched in credit unions and communities.
Yeah.
So really, really powerful,
Oh,
powerful stuff.
that's awesome.
Now I have to tell a funny on me just for a minute. I think I told you this, but at the end, I mean, it's exhausting. Not
Yeah.
just
Oh,
not
gosh. Yeah.
facilitating is exhausting, of course, anyway. And so a
Yeah.
week long of that, the participants were exhausted. Everyone is exhausted. So I'm taking an Uber back from, just it's like a 25-minute Uber back to the airport to
Mhm.
fly home. I fell asleep. I fell like fast, hard asleep in the Uber. So much so that when the driver stopped at the Dane County Airport, he had to like tap me on the leg and wake me up. He's like, "Sir, are you okay? Are you asleep?" Isn't that hilarious? I mean, that's how tired I was
Yeah.
after this week. So to me, again, that's a measure of success in what you put into a program like DE. So it's cool.
Without a doubt, right. If the program can still wipe you out to the point of such exhaustion that you're falling asleep on the way to the airport, yeah, I think it's still still pretty impactful
Yeah.
from what
Yep.
I can tell.
Yep.
Very cool. So I've been asking people at the end of these episodes to share what they're discouraged about and encouraged about the credit union movement in the years ahead. But I've decided to strike the discouraged part because I want to keep things very positive. And so forget about that question. And so my last question for you, Gerry, is what are you most encouraged about, or what are you most looking forward to seeing this credit union industry of ours accomplish in the coming years?
Sure. I think I'll just hammer on the word collaboration. I think I see it in Montana and I see it around the country, and I think collaboration is going to be even more vital moving forward as we're trying to solve challenges and problems that our members and our communities are facing. I think we're going to have to do it together, and I've seen the power of that even in cities in Montana where there's, I'll use air quotes, competition among credit unions.
Hmm.
It stops immediately when somebody says help, or somebody says I have a question, or somebody says have you guys tried this. The competition part of it immediately stops and the collaboration starts, and that you don't see that in a lot of places, right? And especially in other industries you don't see that. And so what I'm encouraged about is it's happening, and what I'm really encouraged about for the future is it's going to continue to happen
Mm,
if we make it so. And I think we have to make it intentional. I think leaders across the movement have to step up and step into it. I think we're going to see a sea change of new leaders coming in. So what can we do to make sure that that collaborative spirit stays alive?
mm.
Because I really think it's critical to our survival and absolutely for us thriving. So I'm encouraged about what I'm seeing, and I'm hopeful about what's to come.
Yeah, yeah. Well, I appreciate you leading the charge in reminding folks about the cooperative nature of
Mhm.
our industry. Just to, wrap a bow around our conversation here. We talked a lot about cooperatives, and I think you're totally right. Cooperatives, being cooperative is definitely the credit union superpower.
Mhm.
So let's continue to lean in on that. Gerry Singleton, President and CEO of Montana's Credit Unions. Thanks for joining the Credit Union Nation podcast. Appreciate it.
Mhm. Thanks so much, Tom. Thanks for having me.